Greetings YouTube, this is Rhett with Rolling Forward, and I left off last time having just had the tongs installed, screwed into my skull, and so I'm laying in bed with ice tongs basically in my skull with weights hanging from a rope off the end of the bed, giving me cervical traction, pulling my skull up to allow my spine to hopefully return to its correct position and alignment and begin to heal the bones of the spine that were fractured. I fractured C3, 4, 5, and 6, compression fracture of 3, 4, 5, and a dislocation fracture at C6. And so I have the tongs. And now we're probably 2 days past the accident, day and a half, 2 days probably, and the concern becomes a little bit longer term focus medically, and the problem of bed sores, pressure sores, comes up, and I need some way to be repositioned regularly in bed. I was stuck in bed, couldn't get up because of broken bones in my neck, and how to move me regularly every couple of hours to a different position so that no one position, no one part of my body was being laid on for too long, and thus resulting in a breakdown of circulation, which leads to a breakdown of skin, which leads to a pressure sore or bed sore, and that can be very ugly and long-term and really, really bad for pressure sores, also sometimes called decubitus ulcers, ugly things. So the hospital brings in to the room a circoelectric bed. Again, you can certainly look that up on the internet too. Circoelectric bed. It was the bed was like a big Ferris wheel. There were two big metal circles about 6 feet in diameter, and one diameter of them was a bed, a little more than a stretcher really, bolted inside this circle, just like a diameter. The way the bed worked is I would be laying on the mattress or the stretcher inside this wheel, and the nurses would put another stretcher, if you will, mattress on top of me, and it was made to bolt in to this frame, so that at that point it was like a Rhett sandwich. I was laying on a stretcher, and above me was a stretcher, and there were motors at the bottom of these two circles of metal pipe tubing. They turn the motors on, push a button, and the entire circular bed would rotate just like a wheel. It would rotate. I would, my head would come up, and my feet would go down. I'm in a standing position or a straight lying position, and my head would go up to the top till I was vertical, and then keep going more all the way until I was level again, only I would be looking down at the floor rather than looking up at the ceiling. This was going to be my bed for a month and a half coming up, and every 2 or 3 hours I was rolled from on my back, head over the top, looking down at the floor, Then after a couple, 3 hours, put back and laying on my back with the Rett sandwich, just moving back and forth like that. Uh, the first few times it was interesting. I always passed out at the top from a drop in blood pressure, and my neck would throb, throb in pain for 20 or 30 seconds afterwards. Then it would fade out. It became routine quite quickly, and in fact, the scene over subsequent days became more and more kind of maintenance, almost, not quite, but almost maintenance, as the acute fears of medical complications, medical issues, to some degree faded. Um, I must say that I later learned that on the bedside on the bedside table, they always kept a tracheotomy kit so that should I need to be, uh, should I have breathing trouble, they could very quickly give me a tracheotomy and hook up a ventilator. That's actually not at all an uncommon situation for quads, for high-level quads, because often in the initial hours and days following an injury, perhaps the fracture and injury is at C5. Initially there's some swelling, and that swelling can cause the person to lose a level of function due to the swelling, and that often came back after some number of weeks, and the swelling begins to go down, and that nerve root above the fracture almost fully recovers often. Sometimes there is residual deficit. But I didn't know that tracheostomy kit was there. Nobody told me that on purpose. I didn't learn that until weeks, maybe even months later. I don't honestly remember exactly when I learned that. Also, the I had some big, big scrapes, rug rash, sand rash on the back of my shoulders. My shoulder blades had just scuffed off like sandpaper, and I had large scabs on the back of each shoulder, and they had begun to itch. The holes in my skull began to itch really bad, and my sister became the pro scratcher with Q-tips and peroxide, with washcloths and warm water. She would scrape and scratch the tongs, the point at which the tongs went into my skull through my scalp, and the wound there through my scalp was weeping and itching, and she was a pro at cleaning it and scratching. Likewise, the large scabs, which had sand embedded in them, that was the source of the scraping injury, and she would soak them in warm water, washcloths, and begin over days and weeks to remove these large scabs that itch like a son of a gun. Also, I had a cut across the top of my head. It required, I don't know, 10 or 11 stitches, and I imagined that the impact of hitting my head, landing on my head, I imagined being thrown up into the roof of the car and cutting my head on the inside of the roof. I don't know if that's true. I saw a photo of the car, the early 60s, I don't know, maybe 1960, International Travelall vehicle. It had began tumbling and so on at a high rate of speed. All four wheels were either completely askew or were just completely missing from the vehicle. The top was connected only by, the roof was connected only by the two posts at the very rear of the vehicle, and the top itself was simply pointing straight up to the sky as if it were a convertible halfway open or halfway closed. So I know there were more than one person ejected from the vehicle because I subsequently read a CHP report about the accident. So I don't know if I hit the inside of the vehicle. I don't know if I was ejected and landed head first in the desert. But anyway, I had a cut across the very top of my head, which didn't really bother me much, although sometimes I felt as if there was some pressure there or something. Um, let's see. I mentioned before that there were a number of IV bottles hanging next to the bed from poles. Um, I learned in these initial days um, that among the bottles was some simple saline solution that was continuously run into my bladder via a Foley catheter. And a Foley catheter is a small rubber tube, a little bit smaller than a pencil, that's put into the bladder, and it was continuously rinsing my bladder with sterile saline solution, and it was also continuously draining any urine that was to form and simply transported out my body through a tube and into a bag next to the bed. I would learn a lot more about that in coming months and years. As the days passed into weeks, I was losing weight. I mean, I was not really aware of it, but there people were talking about it, and I began to figure, well, I haven't done any exercise, not one bit of exercise, and what's going on? And I had some kind of rash on my body that they were talking about, they being the doctors, the nurses, and my mom, who was there. Remember, my mom had been an RN prior to the kids, my sister and I, being born. She had kept her license up, so she was a licensed RN, and they took every advantage of it they could to have her help them with my care, and it was a good thing for me. I think it was a good thing for my mom to have a role to play and not just be there. It was very helpful to me, her presence. And I was curious about this rash. They put lotion on, washed with antibiotic soap, antibacterial soap, and so on. And I wanted to see it. So then I wanted to see a mirror. I need a mirror. Well, in a day or two, the hospital came in with a really large mirror. It looked more like it was brought in from someone's home. It did not look particularly medical, but it was a mirror. So 2 or 3 people held it up above me, and I saw for the first time that I had, and this was perhaps 2 weeks after my injury, I'm guessing, I saw what looked like a bad acne outbreak all over me, and it freaked me out. I didn't like it. Like, oh man, what's going on? And also, I was pretty skinny, and I over the course of the first, call it 6 weeks post-injury, I lost just about 50 pounds. Remember, I had been very active, athletic, and since my injury, I had done 0 exercise or activity, so I dropped about 50 pounds. and I didn't like it. Um, and I didn't like this rash or acne, whatever, quite off-putting to me. And I mean, I was still a vain teenager, remember, also. Um, but the ICU was quite realistic. We were a quite long-term uh, customer to be in ICU. Uh, I was there for a little over 3 weeks, and they let my mom uh, be there all the time. Um, they let family and visitors come at any time. Uh, didn't matter if it was visiting hours. It didn't matter if there were very strict limits in ICU for the numbers of visitors. Um, they recognized I was a little atypical in that I needed the care, but I needed some social interacting as well. Um, so we're in the period of transitioning, I guess, from the acute medical issues first were of prime concern. That was beginning to fade, and now it was a little bit longer term view, um, thinking about what the future is going to be, completely ignorant at that time. And it would, in coming weeks, transition into more of a social awakening, um, and less of a acute medical. And I think I'll leave it at that and pick it up next time with some new friends that I meet in the hospital. And I want to thank you all for watching. Please do, click subscribe, click like, kind of want to do that for a reminder. So thank you, YouTube, and ciao.